Hi ladies, this is Shirley with Club Afia. You will recall, I hope, that Club Afia is the club for women where there are no borders. Club Afia is a women's club and a very special kind of resource center. And we have no borders, we acknowledge no borders at Club Afia because we reach out to women everywhere in the world, and our mission is to support, embrace, and expand women's leadership everywhere in the world that we possibly can. And for us, women's leadership is really, really important because we know from experience and from history, from research, that when women are fully engaged in our communities, our societies do better. One piece of evidence about this that I heard years ago and that resonated with me, continues to resonate very strongly with me, was a document from the United Nations that declared that when it was a document about literacy and teaching women, and it declared that when women learn to read, they teach everybody. They teach families, they teach communities, they just teach. When men learn to read, men teach their sons, and often their firstborn sons. That is a reality in families and communities around the world. Everywhere in the world, pretty much. So much value is put on men, on the sons, on the boys in families. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with valuing and honoring our men, our sons, our fathers, our brothers, our grandfathers, our uncles, our husbands. The problem arises when we value men and not women, when we value girls and women less. And this is a reality across the world. We do. I remember a few years ago, I think it was 2011, and I can look for it. Actually, I'm going to read it to you now. I came across this article about girls in India who were given the opportunity to change their names. Now, just listen to this. This is from India World in 2011. More than 200 girls participate in a renaming ceremony where their parents and guardians take an oath to refrain from using names such as unwanted. And the story is, when Shivaji Pisa's third child was born, yet another daughter, his parents insisted on naming her Nakusa, which means unwanted in the local Marathi language. He said, "I didn't really care what we called her. 3 girls is one too many." Yesterday, however, Nakusa, 5 years old, joined more than 200 other girls in a renaming ceremony in the small town of Satara, 260 kilometers south of Mumbai. During the ceremony, the girls and their parents and guardians took an oath to protect the girls, discourage discrimination, and refrain from using names such as unwanted. These girls, mostly named Nakusa or Nakoshi, which means unwanted, were handed name change certificates, allowing them to legally change their names to whatever they wished. And many of them chose to name themselves after Bollywood actresses. Nakusa Budwale, where she was Nakusa, now she's Aishwarya, which means wealth. Another one became Pooja, which she chose the name Pooja, which means worship, and her father apparently still remained ambivalent about the name. Imagine that. Imagine growing up being called unwanted. Imagine that. Some of us can't, but for some women, for many girls, apparently that is the reality of their lives. So again, that is one of the reasons why I have been doing the work I've been doing all these years, and this is one of the reasons behind the development of Club Afia. The issue for me is equality. The issue for me and many of my friends and colleagues who work in this area is, in one word, equality. There are different people working on different aspects of equality, but the general idea is that we achieve equality for women. And it's important not just for women, it's important for our societies, our communities. Our communities in general, thrive when women are supported, when women participate. The general definition of gender equality is, the generally accepted definition is the right to equal opportunity and resources regardless of gender. so that women have opportunity to be educated. In some parts of the world, that is a norm for many of us. In many other parts of the world, it is not. The world-renowned case of girls being deprived of education, for example, is Malala Yousafzai. We all know the story. We all know the reasons. Now, the United Nations has determined that there are 132 million girls out of school. 132 million girls every year are not going to school. 66% of countries have achieved gender parity in primary education, for example. Now, of course, it is not just because they are girls. There are other kinds of situations that militate against education. Poverty does, war, living in rural areas, underserved areas, not having access to schools and so on. So there are all of these reasons. But what compounds this is that when you have these circumstances and people are given a choice, boys get the option, generally speaking, of going to school. Now, just like you, I know many of the reasons why customs and religions and traditions and history and so on work against equality for women. We come up with all kinds of reasons, everything from, assuming that if women go out to work, the whole family structure is going to break down. That was the story in the Western world, for example, and it is part of the story in other parts of the world. And we are not going to debate that. For me, the important thing is choice, people having options in how they live. And girls and women around the world have fewer options, are allowed fewer options, and everywhere in the world, than men are. Women and girls around the world are stymied, are restricted in our access to all kinds of things, equal pay, education. I can give you a whole list of them. We all know them. And what women and girls choose to do once they've exercised their options is their choice. That's their option. For me, the important thing is that there be the option, and the options are only available when equality is acknowledged. Yes, when people acknowledge that you don't call girls unwanted, because no child is quote unquote unwanted. There is value in everyone. Yes. Now, part of what we're going to talk about over some part of the rest of my 30-day challenge is women's equality, is women's position, women's ability to exercise their options. Reports from United Nations and other think tanks and the World Economic Forum, for example, have determined that gender equality is not going to be a reality in the world for at least another century. Now, of course, there are groups of women working against that. There are groups that call it the 50-50 by 2030 who are agitating for political equality, for example. And I'm not sure that the World Economic Forum is the best source for this, because their makeup, for example, the World Economic Forum has a lot of information. They do a lot of research. And they have put out a lot of information about gender parity and women's equality and women's opportunities and so on. But their membership, for example, they are run by a board of trustees and a managing board and an executive board. The board of trustees has 29 members. Only 6 are women. Their managing board has 12 members. Only 2 are women. The World Economic Forum says it is the International Organization for Public-Private Cooperation, and the forum strives to model world-class corporate governance. And that struck me because that is the state of world-class governance, so few women, many fewer women than men. It also says the Board of Trustees of the World Economic Forum comprises outstanding leaders from business, politics, academia, and civil society. But anyhow, the information, we won't dwell on that at the moment. The information that they put out, for example, reminds us that in, for example, 1980, Iceland became the first country in the world to elect a woman as president and became known as the world's most feminist country. between the World Economic Forum and United Nations and the World Bank and so on, we have information about women in the world. 24.3% of national parliaments was made up of women. As of June 2019, 11 women are serving as head of state and 12 are serving as head of government. Rwanda has the highest number of women parliamentarians worldwide, but Rwanda still is and Rwanda figures into the countries in the world where gender equality is highest, but it has still a very long way to go. The gender gap exists in business also. According to a recent study, there has been some progress of women gaining seats on corporate boards in the United States, for example. They had 25.9% of seats in 2019, but women in top board leadership roles remained almost unchanged at 7.5% in 2019 compared to 7.4% in 2015. I am reading down here, women currently hold 5.8%, 5.8% of CEO positions at S&P 500 companies, Standards & Poor's 500 companies. According to the World Bank, Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest rate of entrepreneurship globally, and this is the only region where the majority of entrepreneurs are women. Yet, most women's businesses remain stuck at this micro level, unable to grow due to a range of factors that include, barriers to growth include social norms that, say women should not be working, cannot be working, have to do, have all the other things that women are required to do, and that work against them when it comes to business. Women don't have the networks because in many instances women are not as free to move around and meet and interact with people as men are. And there is also the question of the technology gender gap, which is widening. In fact, one of the documents from the World Economic Forum says that the gender bias against women has actually increased in the last decade worldwide. So put all of these together, and what we have is a world where women, we are not equal. And again, it would be so much better for everybody in the world if women were. Families do better when women are earning because they have they have greater resources, they have more money, they have the chances of escaping poverty, dire poverty, and doing better, and supporting children in getting educated and elevating families as generations, as you go through generations. A lot of that is driven by education. And other studies have shown that educated mothers result in healthier families, healthier children, safer communities. There are all of these things that need to be considered. And so all of those things are things that we are working on in Afia for women and for men and for the world. And coming out of the COVID crisis, it is important. We think it is critical that we continue to work for women's equality, for women's advancement. We continue to be focused and relentless is probably the word, relentless about this. It is important to many, many women. It is good for our families, good for our small communities, good for our larger, wider communities, good for our countries. It is good for the world. And so that is one of the bases, one of the fundamentals, one of the foundation stones of Club Afia. Women's equality, women's empowerment, women's access to resources and opportunity. So come hang out with us, join us. This week we're also putting out some new information about Afia. So stay tuned, keep listening. Thank you so much for following me with this. I hope this is of value to you, and I look forward to seeing you along the way. Take good care.